Romance of Sui and Tang Dynasties Chapter 97.
You know when you're watching a movie, a big war epic or something, and the bad guy finally goes down, the music swells, everyone's cheering in the streets, and it's just this massive happy resolution. It's that classic Return of the Jedi ending.
Oh, right, yeah. The Ewoks are dancing, the fireworks are going off. It's a very comforting narrative. But, I mean, historically speaking, it's rarely how things actually play out.
Exactly. The end of a war is usually, well, it's just the beginning of a completely different kind of mess.
A huge mess. The morning after a war is usually just cleanup, trauma, and a lot of really awkward political compromises.
And that morning after feeling is exactly what we're getting into today. Specifically, the opening of Chapter 97. And let me tell you, if you're looking for a victory parade, you are in the wrong place.
Yeah, the vibe is incredibly melancholy right from the start. We are looking at a world trying to glue itself back together after a massive catastrophic trauma.
We're talking about the direct aftermath of the Andalusian Rebellion.
Which, for the Tang Dynasty, was basically a stroke. I mean, the empire survived it, but the patient was never quite the same again.
Never the same. So the imperial forces have just retaken Dongjing, which is the eastern capital, modern-day Luoyang. But the text doesn't actually open with these soldiers marching in or cheering crowds. It starts with a poem.
And it is a fascinating poem. It immediately sets the hook for everything we're going to talk about today.
It really does. It explores this universal human experience of separation and reunion, but it uses this flower metaphor that is just, well, it's striking. It contrasts what it calls famous flowers with the kunged plum.
Right, the meihua, the plum blossom that blooms in the winter. In Chinese culture, that is the ultimate symbol of resilience because it thrives in the frost. It blooms when everything else is freezing and dying.
So the famous flowers in this poem, they represent the high-ranking concubines, the celebrities of the court, the people who were pampered and beautiful. But when the storm of war came, they were just destroyed, blown away with the wind.
But the plum blossom survived the cold. And that is really the thesis statement for the flashy people who played the worldly political games. They didn't make it. The people we're going to meet in this chapter, the survivors, they are the plum blossoms. They made it through because of something internal, whether that's sheer stubbornness, integrity, or spiritual cultivation.
We are going to explore three distinct layers of this post-war reality that the source lays out for us. First, the brutal political layer, how the state handles victory. Then the family layer, trying to reconnect a broken lineage. And finally, a mystical layer, where we just leave the dust of the world entirely to find someone who seems to have cheated time itself.
It's a perfect cross-section of 8th century life. You've got the state, the family, and the spirit, all trying to find a new equilibrium after the chaos.
Let's start with the state, because the politics here are fascinating. The current emperor, Sezong, is running the show. But the context is, it's incredibly tricky.
Tricky is an understatement, because while Suzong is the current emperor, his father, the retired emperor Xuanzong, the guy who was literally on the throne when the rebellion started, he is still alive.
Right.
He's effectively in exile in Shu, which is modern-day Sichuan. And that creates this horribly awkward power dynamic. Suzong has retaken the capital, but his dad is still out there.
It's like, I have the house now, but dad still has the keys.
Yeah.
So Sezong sends a really high-ranking official, Wei Jiansu, to go to Sichuan. And on the surface, the source presents this as a display of filial piety, like, Father, we won, it's safe, please come home.
But politically, if you read between the lines, it's Sezong's way of saying, I have secured the empire, it is safe for you to return, specifically as a retired emperor. He needs the old emperor's physical presence and blessing to legitimize his own rule, but he definitely doesn't want him taking the reins back.
It's a delicate dance. But the real action for our story is happening back in the eastern capital, Dongjing. Sezong sends a team to stabilize that city. He appoints a man named King Gushen as imperial commissioner and Luo Kai as vice director of the Ministry of War.
And they are carrying a very important imperial decree.
Yes, and I really want to unpack this decree with you, because when I read it, it honestly sounds like a desperate document.
Oh, it is a masterclass in crisis management. It shows exactly how fragile the Tang government actually was at that exact moment.
Look at the very first point in the edict. It explicitly credits the generals and the soldiers with recreating the nation. Not defending it, recreating it. That is a heavy, heavy word choice.
It is an absolute admission that the dynasty was basically dead. The mandate of heaven had slipped through their fingers, and these soldiers forcefully pulled it back. The emperor is looking right at the military and acknowledging, I owe my throne entirely to you.
And he puts his money where his mouth is. The edict orders that half of the treasury found in the retaken city is to be used immediately to reward the army. Half.
Just think about the sheer scale of that. We are talking about the treasury of an imperial capital, and he is giving away 50% of it on day one.
Is that just extreme generosity?
Not at all. The source gives a very specific, actually pretty chilling reason for this payout. It says it's to prevent them from harassing the civilians.
That line stopped me in my tracks. He is basically paying his own army not to sack the city they just liberated.
Exactly. And this marks a huge historical pivot point that the source captures perfectly. We are seeing the shift from a highly disciplined, centralized imperial army to a landscape of warlordism. The central government is weak. The soldiers know they hold all the cards.
If the emperor doesn't pay out right now,
they become bandits. He is effectively paying protection money to his own troops just to save the civilian population.
That is a terrifying dynamic. So he uses the carrot for the soldiers, but then he brings out the stick for the traitors. The decree orders the arrest of over 300 officials who surrendered to the rebels.
Right, including some major figures like Daxi Shun. They are rounded up, put in chains, and sent to the western capital to face punishment.
300 officials. That is a massive chunk of the administrative bureaucracy.
It is, but for the emperor, loyalty is non-negotiable right now. If you worked for the rebel and Lushan, you are done. Your career is over, and probably your life too.
But here is where the story gets really interesting. It's not just a witch hunt for the bad guys. It's an active search for the good ones. The emperor is desperate to find scholars who refuse to break.
He needs moral symbols. He needs to prove to the public that integrity, the concept of Qiji, still exists in the world. And the text highlights two specific men, Zenji and Su Yuanming.
I have to talk about Zenji. This story is just incredible. I read this section twice because I couldn't believe it. This guy was a well-known scholar, and even before the rebellion really kicked off, An Lushan wanted to hire him.
Because An Lushan was talent scouting.
Yeah.
He wanted credible, respected intellectuals to lend legitimacy to his rebellion.
But Zenji smells a rat. He knows An Lushan is trouble, so he decides to fake an illness. And not just a cough, he fakes a mute sickness. He just completely stops talking.
It's a classic trope in Chinese history, feigning illness to avoid political service. But Zenji commits to the bit with an intensity that is, frankly, terrifying.
Yeah, because when the rebellion actually starts, An Lushan sends an executioner to Zenji's house. I want you to just imagine this scene. A guy with a sword stands in your living room and essentially says, "Come work for the rebellion or I cut your head off right now."
And Zenji doesn't flinch.
He doesn't say a single word. The text says he just stretched out his neck for the blade.
He called their bluff using his own life as the chips. It is the ultimate form of passive resistance. He was telling them, you can physically kill me, but you cannot make me speak for your cause.
And it worked. The executioner was either so convinced that the guy was genuinely brain dead, or he was just totally creeped out. He went back to An Lushan and reported that the illness was real. He said, "This guy is broken. He's useless to us."
It perfectly illustrates the Taoist concept of the usefulness of being useless. By appearing completely broken and useless to the world, he saved his own life. And now that the emperor has returned, that quote-unquote useless madman is appointed as a secretary.
It sends such a powerful message. The guys who tried to play politics, who hedged their bets and switched sides, they are currently in chains heading for execution. The guy who acted like a mute vegetable, he gets a major promotion.
It circles right back to that cold plum metaphor. The storm destroyed the showy flowers, but the silent, stubborn plum blossom survived the winter.
And there's also Su Yuanming, who similarly feigned a severe illness to refuse titles from the rebels, and he gets appointed as a drafter. So that's the political house cleaning. We've established the state's baseline for heroes and villains, but now the source zooms the camera way in. We go from the fate of the entire nation to the fate of a single family.
We shift our focus back to our two envoys, Qin Guzhen and Luo Kai. They have finished their official duties in Dongjing. The edicts are delivered, the arrests are made, and now they sit down and start talking about personal matters.
And it turns out they are related. They share what the text calls a middle relative connection. They're cousins. And Luo Kai starts unpacking his family tree for Qin. Now, usually when a text starts listing ancestors, my eyes totally glaze over.
Sure.
But here, Luo Kai drops a name that wakes you right up. He mentions Luo Cheng.
the cold-faced silver spear. I mean, if you are a fan of the Sui Tang cycle, hearing the name Luo Cheng is like hearing the name Skywalker. He is this legendary, devastatingly handsome, invincible general who died tragically young.
So Luo Kai isn't just some random paper-pushing bureaucrat. He is royalty in the world of martial heroes.
Exactly. It connects him directly to that deep legacy of martial virtue. He explains to Qin that Luo Cheng had two wives, Lady Du and Lady Hua. Luo Kai is a descendant of the Lady Hua line.
But the other line, the Lady Du line, that one ran into some serious trouble.
It withered. It eventually trickled down to a grand uncle who had no sons. So the family line was effectively dead in terms of patriarchal succession, except for one single daughter.
Sugu, also referred to as Lady Luo.
And her story starts out as a complete tragedy. She really represents the precarious plight of women in this era. She was married off to the Bai family, but she was widowed almost immediately. She is young, she is completely alone, and she has no children to anchor her or support her in that household.
But she doesn't remarry. She doesn't go looking for a new political protector. She turns completely inward. She becomes a Taoist nun. The text says she starts cultivating truth.
And this is exactly where the narrative pivots from a gritty historical drama into pure fantasy. Luo Kai tells Qin that this aunt, Sugu, had a mystical encounter. She met an immortal.
The famous Luo Gongwan.
Yes, a major figure in Taoist mythology. And Luo Gongwan recognized her as a kinswoman because they share the Luo surname, and he saw her deep spiritual potential. He was incredibly impressed by her chastity and her absolute focus, so he gave her a gift.
A longevity pill.
A pill to defeat the rosy clouds. That is the poetic way the source describes it. It essentially halts the aging process. Luo Kai tells Qin that his aunt is well over 60 years old right now, but thanks to this immortal's pill, she hasn't aged a day past her youth.
And she is living in a temple called the Cultivating Truth View out in the mountains of Lanyang. Luo Kai has been worrying sick about her because he hasn't heard a single word from her during the entire rebellion. He doesn't even know if she's alive or dead. So he proposes they take a road trip to go find her.
And notice the physical shift in protocol here, because it is crucial. They do not travel as the Imperial Commissioner and the Vice Director.
Right. The text is very specific that they change their clothes.
They switch into civilian dress. They leave all the pomp and circumstance of the state behind, because you cannot enter the realm of the immortals wearing the uniform of the bureaucracy. They have to symbolically shed their worldly status to make this journey.
They leave the massive entourage behind. They just take a few servants and they ride out to Lanyang, to White Cloud Mountain. And when they arrive, the locals have a nickname for this temple. They call it Small Penglai.
Penglai is the mythical island of the immortals in Chinese folklore. It's where the gods live. So calling this place Small Penglai implies that the veil between the mortal, war-torn world and the divine world is incredibly thin on this specific mountain.
The locals also give them a warning. They say, yes, the white fairy ant lives up there, but good luck seeing her. She rarely sees guests.
It's a classic master on the mountain trope. If you want the wisdom, you have to find a way past the gatekeeper.
And there is literally a gatekeeper. They get to the temple and the doors are shut tight. They knock and this old woman blocks the path. She just says, the mistress is in closed-door meditation. Go away.
Now think about this. If they were wearing their official robes, they probably would have just demanded entry, right? Open up in the name of the emperor. But they aren't. They are just men seeking family.
So Luo Kai plays the only card that actually trumps spiritual isolation. He plays the family card. He says, I am her nephew, Luo Kai.
And that breaks the barrier. Blood opens the door when political power couldn't.
The description of the inside of this temple is stunning. It creates this overwhelming contrast with everything else we've read in the chapter so far. We've been talking about massive armies, empty treasuries, political executions, and suddenly we step through these doors into a space of total, absolute serenity.
The source mentions the fragrant incense smoke hanging in the air, the solemn statues, but pay attention to the specific imagery. Pairs of cranes standing tall and evergreen pines.
Both massive symbols of longevity in Taoism.
Exactly. And the profound silence of the place. The text specifically notes there are no bells, no drums, just quiet cultivation. It emphasizes that this space is operating on a completely different frequency than the rest of the empire. The war outside is just noise. This temple is silence.
And then she appears. Suguswa, the ageless ant.
And she totally delivers on the supernatural promise. She walks out wearing blue and white Taoist robes, and she is holding a fly whisk.
And the fly whisk is a really interesting detail, right? It's not just a tool for swatting bugs.
No, in Taoist iconography, the fly whisk is highly symbolic. It represents sweeping away the dust of the mundane world, sweeping away worries, desires, political ambitions. She is literally holding the physical symbol of her detachment from everything we discussed in part 1.
And the text explicitly confirms that she looks nowhere near 60 years old. She looks like a beautiful young woman. The immortal's pill really worked.
Defeating the rosy clouds. It's fascinating to me how matter-of-fact the source is about this magic. In Sui Tangyani, history and fantasy just sit side by side on the couch.
Yeah.
You've got intense state tax policy on one page and literal immortality pills on the next, and the narrative treats both as completely real.
So the family reunion happens, and it's very polite, it's formal. Luokai introduces himself, they bow, they start catching up. But then we get to the moment in the text that actually made me pause and reread the page.
Ah, the reaction.
Yes. Luokai introduces his friend. He says, "Auntie, this is my cousin, the top graduate, Kingo Zhen." And Sugu, who has been totally zen, totally detached up to this exact second, she just stops.
The text says she only cared about chanting the word kin in her mouth and pondering it.
She completely gets stuck on it, just muttering, "King today."
It is such a wonderfully weird, specific detail to include. Why would a recluse nun, who has supposedly severed all ties with the mortal world, care so deeply about a random surname?
It feels like a glitch in the Matrix. Like, does she know something? Is there a prophecy involved? Is there some ancient karmic debt between her and the Kin family that the text hasn't revealed yet?
Or on a psychological level, perhaps it suggests that even for a near immortal, you can never fully escape your past. Maybe hearing that specific name triggers a memory she thought she had swept away with that fly whisk years ago. The text doesn't explicitly explain it here, it just drops it and leaves it hanging in the air.
It adds this brilliant layer of mystery to what was otherwise a simple reunion. But the awkward moment eventually passes. The men offer her some worldly gifts. She initially refuses because she is outside the web of social and material obligations, but she eventually accepts them just out of politeness.
And then they finally ask the question that you and I and everyone listening wants the answer to. They ask, "Auntie, this entire region was on fire. The rebel armies were swooping through here, destroying everything. How are you not dead? How is this temple not a pile of ash?"
And her answer is fascinating. She doesn't claim she fought them off with Taoist magic or lightning bolts. She credits the geography.
She invokes the spiritual history of the land itself. She mentions the immortal Luo Gongyu and leaving his mark there, of course. But then she drops a really incredible historical deep cut. She says this very mountain is where Zhang Liang practiced grain avoidance.
Zhang Liang. That is a huge name. He was the legendary genius strategist of the Han Dynasty, the guy who helped build an entire empire and then just walked away from it all.
He is the ultimate archetype of the retiring hero. The legend says he came to this exact spot on White Cloud Mountain to practice bigu, which means avoiding grains, a Taoist fasting practice aimed at achieving immortality. Sugu implies that because these massive spiritual heavyweights lived and meditated here, the very soil of the mountain has a natural immunity to soldiers and fire.
It's like they're sitting inside a spiritual force field. The violence of the An Lushan rebellion just flowed around them like water around a rock.
It completely reinforces that theme of the cold plum one last time. If you are cultivated enough, if your roots are planted deep enough in the Tao, the chaos of the political world simply cannot touch you.
The narrative ends this section with this remarkably peaceful scene. They are all eating a simple vegetarian meal together, touring the beautiful scenic spots of the temple grounds. It is the ultimate calm after the storm.
The scene shifts abruptly. Picture this. It is the dead of winter. We are talking about the kind of cold that just completely snaps branches. And you are walking through this really secluded, winding corridor in a quiet convent.
Right, outside the world is completely dormant. You've got frozen ground, bare trees, a gray sky.
Yeah, exactly. Everything is dead. But then you pass a room that is heavily locked, sealed up super tight with nothing but a tiny opening covered by a board. And then you encounter this massive contradiction.
A sensory impossibility, really.
Right. You are suddenly hit with the intense, overwhelming fragrance of fresh plum blossoms. And I don't mean like dried flowers or perfume. I mean living, blooming flora, right in the middle of a hard freeze.
Which immediately tells you that the normal rules of the world have been completely suspended.
For sure. Now, for anyone who knows this era of Chinese literature, we usually deal with like battlefield tactics, court intrigue, the rise and fall of emperors.
Massive historical sweeps.
Right, massive historical sweeps. But this chapter just feels totally different. It feels like a detour into the Twilight Zone.
It is a detour, but I'd argue it's a completely necessary one. You see, this excerpt sits right squarely in the middle of the Anlishan Rebellion.
Which was huge.
Absolutely catastrophic. It was the event that essentially broke the back of the Tang Golden Age. And what fascinates me about this specific chapter is how it handles that trauma. It takes the gritty, horrifying reality of a political collapse, and it blends it with the high fantasy of the Chuanqi genre.
Chuanqi being like tales of the strange, right?
Exactly. Tales of the strange, the miraculous.
So we basically have a gritty historical war story on one side and high-level Taoist magic on the other.
Why they are blended like this? We really need to look at how this story uses magic stuff like flying donkeys and everlasting flowers, not just as a cool spectacle, but as a genuine way to process the sheer chaos of war. It's really about destiny or karma stepping in and asserting itself when human institutions are just completely falling apart.
King Gushen and his cousin Liu Kai.
Yeah. And they stumble upon this sensory mystery. They see these 3 rooms completely sealed off, emitting this totally impossible scent. So naturally, they ask Sugu for an explanation. They're like, is there a plum tree inside? How is it surviving the frost?
And Sugi's response is so cryptic. She just says, well, the scent comes from the room, but it isn't born here, and it isn't blooming on a tree.
That right there is your first major signal that we're dealing with something supernatural. She refuses to let them in, obviously, because the doors are sealed, but she invites them to sit down. She says it's a long story, and this frame narrative allows us to flash back to how these rooms actually became occupied in the first place.
Right, and this is where we meet our first resident, Lady Jiang. And her arrival story is where the high fantasy really kicks into high gear.
So Lady Jiang is the wife of the Li family, and she was living in Xijing, the Western capital. When Anlushan's rebels attacked, the city fell into absolute unimaginable panic. We have to remember that the fall of the capital wasn't just a military defeat. It was a societal apocalypse.
Total breakdown of order, looting, burning, the works.
Exactly. Lady Jiang is fleeing for her life. She gets separated from her family, and she is absolutely convinced she is about to die.
It's a moment of just total helplessness, and right in that moment, she is saved. But she's not saved by a passing Tang army or some brave royal guard. She is saved by a fairy.
A fairy who gives her a very specific magical mount to escape on. A white donkey.
Okay, I have to pause here. A white donkey. Because in Western fantasy, you get, I don't know, a Pegasus or a dragon or a giant eagle. Why a donkey?
I love this detail. It's actually a very specific trope in Taoist mythology. The most famous example is Zhang Guilao, who was one of the 8 immortals. He famously rode a white donkey. So in this cultural context, the donkey signals to the reader that this isn't just a convenient mode of transportation. It is direct divine intervention. The fairy tells her to close her eyes and hold on.
And when she does, she feels completely weightless. She's flying. The text literally describes it as soaring through the air with the wind just rushing past her ears.
It acts almost as a dissociation from reality. She literally rises above the chaos of the rebellion. When she finally lands, she's at this convent. But here's the detail that I find the most interesting conceptually. As soon as she dismounts, the donkey doesn't hang around.
No, it shoots up into the sky like a bird and just vanishes to the west.
The magic was authorized for transit only. It was a bridge to get her from the realm of extreme danger to the realm of absolute safety. Once she is safe in the convent, the divine vehicle leaves. Its job is done. She is now under the protection of the convent, specifically the nun Zugu, who had actually been warned by a Taoist master named Luo Gongguan that a refugee would be arriving.
Oh, wow. So Lady Jiang is there because the gods, or the immortals, basically plucked her right out of the war zone. She had zero agency in that. She was just a passive victim who got saved. But the second resident, Daxi Yingying, her story feels very different. She doesn't get a magic donkey.
No, she doesn't. Daxi Yingying's arrival is entirely a result of political foresight and human agency. She really represents the other side of the coin in this story. She is the niece of Daxi's son, who is the governor of Henan.
And Daxi's son is, well, let's call him a complicated figure in history.
Complicated is a very polite way to put it. He surrendered to the rebels. He capitulated directly to Anlushan. In the strict Confucian value system of the time, this is the ultimate disgrace. It's high treason. When the Tang forces eventually retake the empire, which everyone knows they inevitably will, Collaborators like Daxi Sun are going to face the most severe punishments imaginable.
Execution, exile, totally erasing their family name from the records.
Precisely. And Daxi Yinging sees all of this coming. She is incredibly sharp. She's watching her uncle surrender, and she is thinking, this is going to completely destroy us.
So she makes a move. She decides to become a nun, not out of some sudden religious fervor, but purely as a survival strategy. She realizes she needs to sever all her legal and social ties to her uncle before the imperial hammer drops on their family.
It's a brilliant, desperate move. She flees to the convent to hide from the political fallout. It is a very pragmatic, calculated decision, especially when you compare it to Lady Jiang's magical flight through the clouds.
It creates such a fascinating contrast. You have one woman who is saved by a literal miracle, and one woman who is saving herself through sheer wit and understanding of politics. But they both end up in the exact same place. They are locked together in a room by Sugu, who clearly recognizes that both of them, the victim of physical war and the victim of political fallout, need to be sequestered until the storm passes.
They become roommates in this totally sealed chamber. They're only communicating with the outside world, or even getting food, to that small opening you mentioned, the Guangdong. And this is the point in the story where the immortals step back in to ensure their safety. We have two major Taoist masters, Luo Gongyuan and Yu Fashan, who pay a visit.
These guys are heavy hitters, legendary figures in Chinese folklore. They arrive to basically set the terms of the women's imprisonment, and they bring gifts that act as, let's call them anchors for their destiny.
Anchors is a great word for it. Let's talk about the source of that mysterious smell again, the plum blossom. This was the specific gift from Yu Fashan to Lady Jiang.
Right, so he conjures a plum blossom branch completely out of thin air. But the magic isn't just the fact that he made it appear, it's the specific condition attached to it. He tells her, this flower will stay fresh, fragrant, and will not wither until you return to your old land and see your old master.
It is a literal stasis field.
Exactly. It's a magical timer. As long as that flower is blooming and smelling sweet, she is in a state of suspended animation relative to the outside world. The chaos of the rebellion outside cannot touch her, but the trade-off is she also cannot move forward. She is frozen in this tiny moment of perfection.
Which perfectly explains why it smells so intensely strong in the dead of winter. It is actively defying the natural cycle of decay. It's a physical manifestation of her paused life.
That brings us to the second gift. The gift for Daxi Yinging. She doesn't get a flower, she gets a poem.
A prophecy disguised as verse, really.
Yeah.
The immortal Luo Gongyuan gives her an 8-line poem and basically tells her the key to your future happiness, and actually the key to Lady Jiang ever going home, is locked inside these words.
This is the part of the story that turns into a full-on detective novel. Sugu recites this poem to our visitors, Qin Gozhen and Luo Kai. And as they are sitting there listening, Qin Gozhen starts to realize this isn't just some generic fortune cookie wisdom. It's literally about him.
It's a great puzzle. Let's break down the lines, because the wordplay here is absolutely crucial to understanding the plot. The opening lines are, fleeing the world, but not fleeing Qin. The man of Qin is actually a relative.
Fleeing the world, but not fleeing Qin. Now, initially, as a reader, I would assume Qin refers to the old Qin dynasty, right? Like the classic idiom about fleeing a tyrannical government.
That is exactly what you were supposed to think. Fleeing the Qin is a very standard literary reference for escaping bad politics. But the poem brilliantly subverts it. It says she's not fleeing Qin, and then it clarifies the man of Qin is a relative, or a close one.
So it shifts from Qin the regime to Qin the surname.
Exactly. And Qin Gozhen is sitting right there, hearing this nun recite the poem, thinking, wait a minute, my surname is Qin.
And then the poem keeps going. It says, seeing Kai in the net.
And sitting right next to him, literally right next to him, is his cousin Luo Kai. The poem is literally naming the people sitting in the room.
There is another line too, river flow can turn together.
River in Chinese is Jiang. That is a direct reference to Lady Jiang, the roommate. And finally, the poem says, look at the ping on the water. Ping refers to duckweed, which traditionally symbolizes wandering or a drifting life. But it's also highly likely a pun on Luo Kai's courtesy name or another identifier for him.
So Qin Gozhen connects all these dots. He looks at Sugu and asks, hey, did this Daxi Yinging happen to mention a guy named Qin back in the capital before the war?
And Sugu confirms it immediately. She says Yinging mentioned that back in the Jiki ward of the capital, there was a marriage discussion, an engagement, essentially, with a nobleman named Qin.
That is the big aha moment. Qin Gozhen lived in Jiking ward. He is that exact man.
It's just a brilliant narrative device. The prophecy reveals that Daxi Yinging didn't just run away to become a nun to hide from her uncle's treason. She ran away to wait for him. The poem explicitly says the kin man is actually a relative. The person she was destined to meet was the very man she was forced to leave behind when the capital fell.
So the puzzle is completely solved. The net mentioned in the poem wasn't a political trap. It was a web of destiny bringing these specific people together at this exact convent. But now they have to actually meet face to face. Sugu goes to the sealed room to tell Yinging, hey, he's here. The prophecy guy is right outside.
And this is where the story gets deeply human. Because Yinging actually hesitates.
Which is wild to me. Why does she hesitate? If this is her grand destiny ordained by the immortals, shouldn't she be running to kick the door down?
Well, you have to think about her current position. She has taken vows. She wears the Taoist robes. She has officially left the world of dust, as they say. In her mind, she has completely severed her connection to romantic love and secular society. She genuinely feels it would be improper, maybe even deeply shameful, to just snap back into her old life the second her ex-fiancé shows up. She actually asks Sugo, I've become a monk. How can I speak of emotional entrapments now?
But Sugu's having none of it. She doesn't buy that excuse at all. She uses the prophecy as the ultimate leverage. She basically tells her, look, the immortal Luo Gongguan knew you were a nun, and he still wrote this poem about you renewing old relations. You cannot argue with an immortal.
It is the perfect theological argument. She frames the romance as a strict religious duty. It is literally the will of heaven that you date this guy.
King Guoshen adds his own pressure, too. He writes a poem back to her, directly reminding her of their specific history at the tower in Jiqing Ward, and that finally convinces her. But the meeting itself, it's not some grand Hollywood embrace.
No, it's not. And this is genuinely my favorite scene in the whole chapter. They meet through the guandong, that tiny little small opening in the sealed room. She doesn't come out. He doesn't go in.
The text describes her appearing in her robes, looking like a fairy descending. And they just look at each other.
Sadness and joy. That is the exact phrase the author uses. They stare at each other with sadness and joy, but they don't even speak initially. It's a classic example of infinite longing conveyed entirely in silence.
That visual of the two of them, separated by a thick wall, just communicating through a tiny aperture, it's incredibly intimate. It feels almost more romantic than if they had just run up and hugged.
Absolutely. In classical Chinese literature, physical obstruction often heavily heightens the emotion of a scene. The wall represents the harsh reality of their situation, the war, the religious vows, the sheer amount of time they've lost. But the visual connection through the whole proves that the emotional bond is still completely intact.
And practically speaking, they can't just leave together right then and there. Qin is an official on an active mission.
Right, he's an envoy. He has official duties to the emperor. He can't just throw a nun on his horse and ride off into the sunset. The physical resolution has to be deferred. He promises to finish his diplomatic mission, report back to the emperor, and then send a proper, respectful retinue to fetch her.
But the implication for the reader is clear. The prophecy is fulfilled, the river will flow again, which means Lady Jian will also finally get to go home.
Yes, the fate of the two women is completely linked. Once Yinging is reclaimed by her destiny and the man of Qin, Lady Jiang is automatically released from her magical exile. You've got the two guys, Qin and Luo Kai, sitting around with the nun, Luo Sugu. They're drinking tea, maybe trying to distract themselves from the fact that the country is falling apart.
Right.
It feels very cozy, very civilized. And then, as scholars do, they start analyzing poetry.
This is peak Tang Dynasty behavior. When in doubt or when in peril, analyze a poem. They're discussing a specific prophecy left on the wall by a famous Taoist immortal named Luo Gongguan.
Let's pause there for a second. For someone who isn't steeped in Chinese folklore, who is Luo Gongguan? Is he a big deal?
Oh, huge deal. Think of him as a Merlin figure, but for Taoism.
Okay, got it.
He was a real historical figure known for magic tricks, alchemy, and prophecy. In this story, he has left an 8-line poem at the temple. The first few lines have already come true, predicting the rebellion and the chaos, but the group is stuck on the ending.
They can't figure out what the immortal was trying to tell them about the present moment.
Exactly.
I love this because it's basically an escape room puzzle from the 8th century. They are trapped in the mountains and trying to solve a riddle. What are the specific lines that have them stumped?
It is the last 3 lines specifically. They are debating them back and forth. Roughly translated, the lines are, Jiang stream can turn together, only see Kai in the net, and look at the duckweed on the water.
Look at the duckweed on the water. That sounds lovely. Very scenic. But pretty useless if you're trying to figure out if you're going to survive a war.
On the surface, yes. It sounds like standard nature imagery. But Chinese poetry, especially in these historical romances, is almost always a word game.
Right. There's always a double meaning.
Always. It relies on homophones, words that sound the same but mean different things, or breaking apart characters to form new meanings. The characters in the story know there is a hidden message. They just can't see it yet.
So walk us through the breakthrough. Because it's Luo Kai, the imperial envoy, who cracks the code, right?
He does. The text describes him pacing around, barefoot, which creates this great image of a frantic intellectual who has totally forgotten his manners in his excitement.
He's fully in the zone.
Yes, and suddenly he stops. He realizes the poem isn't about nature at all. It is about names.
Names, okay.
Take the first part, Jiang Stream. In Chinese, Jiang means river, but it is also a very common surname. He realizes the poem isn't talking about a body of water. It is talking about the surname Jiang.
Oh.
That points directly to the mysterious woman in the next room, Lady Jiang.
That seems almost too easy, doesn't it? The lady named Jiang is mentioned in the poem about Jiang.
True, but that is just the first step. Here is the kicker. He looks at the last line. Look at the duckweed on the water. The Chinese word for duckweed is ping. So, Luo Kai combines the surname Jiang from the first line with the word ping from the last line.
Jiang and Ping. Jiang Caping.
Bingo. Jiang Caping. Now, does that name ring a bell for you?
In the context of the Tang Dynasty, wait, that is Lady May, right? The plum concubine?
The very same. She was Emperor Xuanzong's absolute favorite consort before Yang Guifei came into the picture.
Right.
She was famous for her intellect, her elegance, and her absolute obsession with plum blossoms. But historically and in the story, she vanished during the rebellion. Everyone assumed she was dead, killed in the chaos.
So Luo Kai is standing there, barefoot in a temple, realizing that the quiet woman, she is arguably one of the most famous missing persons in the entire empire.
Exactly. It is a massive revelation. It's like finding a missing celebrity hiding in your Airbnb. But the poem gets even more personal than that. Remember the middle line, only see Kai in the net.
Yeah, the net part. What does that mean?
Luo Kai realizes that Kai refers to him. His name is Luo Kai. The net is a metaphor for the entrapment or the confusion of the times. The prophecy isn't just saying, here is the plum concubine. It is saying, Luo Kai, you're the one who finds her.
That is incredibly convenient. According to this ancient holy text, I am the main character.
It does imply a bit of ego, doesn't it?
Just a little.
But in the worldview of the novel, this is about destiny or Ming. It validates his presence at the temple. He isn't just hiding from the war. He was placed there by cosmic forces specifically to facilitate this reunion.
Okay, so they have a working hypothesis. The lady in the spare room is the emperor's missing ex-girlfriend. But you can't just walk up to a refugee and ask, hey, are you the plum concubine? How do they actually verify it?
They decide to use a proxy. They send the Luosugu to go talk to the other noblewoman, Daxi Yingying. The two women had become close friends while hiding in the temple. If anyone knows the truth, it's Yingying.
And Yingying spills the tea.
She does. She confirms it immediately. She tells Sugu, yes, do not underestimate her. That really is the plum concubine.
Wow.
But this is where we get the backstory, and honestly, this is where the drama really kicks in. Because when I was reading the source material, the reason she was left behind in the capital wasn't just, oops, we forgot her in the rush. It was malicious.
Yes, I saw this in the notes. This is the spicy part. It involves the rivalry with Yang Guifei.
It is incredibly spicy. This is high-stakes palace intrigue. Lady May reveals that when the emperor was fleeing the capital, this is the famous flight to the west, he actually tried to take her with him. He sent people to find her.
So what stopped him?
Yang Guifei, the current favorite.
And the text here, I mean, Lady May does not hold back when describing her. We should be clear, we are just reporting what is in the source material here, but it is harsh.
She really doesn't hold back. Lady May refers to Yang Guifei as a fat maid.
Fat maid, wow. The gloves are completely off.
It is a vicious dig. You have to remember the historical context. Yang Guifei is historically celebrated for being full-figured, opulent, basically the standard of beauty for the High Tang era.
Right.
Lady May, on the other hand, was known for being slender, elegant, like a plum branch. That was her whole aesthetic. So calling her a fat maid is attacking her beauty, her class, and her status all at once.
Is the ultimate Mean Girls moment of the 8th century.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the result was tragic. Yang Guifei essentially blocked the path, throwing a tantrum and forcing the emperor to choose between dealing with a jealous lover or fleeing for his life immediately.
And he chose flight.
He chose flight. Lady May was abandoned in the empty palace with the rebel army marching toward the gates.
That is a terrifying image. The palace is empty, the guards are gone, and you can literally hear the enemy drums getting closer. Which brings us to the part of the story because Lady May tells us how she escaped, and it wasn't by running.
No, Lady May didn't run. She didn't hide. She decided to end it.
She attempted suicide.
She did. She felt she had no other option to preserve her dignity. She didn't want to be captured and humiliated by the rebels. So she took a length of white silk and hung herself from an old plum tree in the courtyard.
The symbolism there is so heavy, dying on the very tree she is named after.
It is deeply poetic, but it wasn't the end. She describes losing consciousness, fading away, but then being cut down. She hits the ground, opens her eyes, and sees a woman standing there. Not a guard, not a servant, but a woman wearing a starry crown and cloud cape.
Which is standard uniform for, I am a celestial being.
Precisely. The woman identifies herself as the wife of Zhang Guo. As we mentioned in our notes, Zhang Guo is one of the 8 immortals. This is big league divine intervention. She tells Lady May, "Your time is not up. My husband sent me to get you out."
And the getaway vehicle is a donkey.
A paper donkey.
I need you to explain this to me. Why paper and why a donkey? Why not a dragon or a flying cloud?
So paper magic is a huge trope in Taoism. The idea is that an adept can infuse a simulacrum, a paper cutout, with ki or spirit, temporarily giving it life. It is basically convenient, portable magic. The immortal's wife opens a drawer, pulls out a paper cutout of a donkey, places it on the ground, and blows on it.
Just a little breath of life.
Exactly. She blows on it, and poof, it inflates into a living, breathing, snow-white donkey. And the text specifically notes that it was a fat donkey.
Again with the body descriptions, even the magic livestock needs to be well fed in this story.
It signifies strength. It means the magic is potent. This isn't a sickly creature. It is ready for a long haul. But there is a catch. Magic always has rules. The immortal tells her, sit on it, but keep your eyes closed. Do not open them until you stop moving.
That is the classic rule in mythology. Orpheus and Eurydice, Lot's wife, if you look, you break the spell.
Exactly. It is a test of faith. So Lady May climbs on, shuts her eyes tight. She describes hearing the wind rushing past her ears with this su-su sound. She isn't just trotting, she is flying.
Wow.
The donkey is literally carrying her through the sky, over the rebel armies, over the burning cities, and lands her gently on the path to the temple in the mountains.
That image is wild, just a woman on a fat white donkey silently cruising through the clouds while the world burns below her.
It is completely surreal, and when she lands, she opens her eyes and she is safe.
Did the donkey turn back into paper?
Actually, in this version, the nun, Sugu, says she saw the white donkey fly away into the clouds after dropping her off, so the donkey kept going.
That's amazing.
But this explains why Lady May was so secretive. How do you tell a group of rational scholars, I just flew in on a magical paper construct sent by a god?
You don't. You keep your mouth shut until someone solves the riddle that explains who you are. Because otherwise they will think you have completely lost your mind.
Right.
So now the cards are on the table.
Yeah.
They know who she is. They have the emperor's missing girlfriend in the guest room. The prophecy is solved. What did they do? Do they just put her back on a donkey and send her to the emperor?
No, now we switch gears again. The magic is over. Now we need bureaucracy.
Of course.
This is what Sui Tangyani does so well. It mixes the mystical with the administrative. Luo Kai and Qin Guozhen are government officials. They know they can't just show up at the palace with a random woman and say, "Found her."
Right. You need a paper trail. You need verification.
Exactly. They write a formal report, a memorial to Prince Guangping. He is the emperor's son, leading the loyalist forces in the eastern capital. But the prince is cautious. He can't just take their word for it. So he sends a delegation to the temple old eunuchs and palace maids who knew Lady May from the before times.
It is basically a visual identification lineup.
It is, and it is a very emotional scene. These old servants see her, and they immediately start weeping and bowing. It is a positive match. The report goes up the chain to the emperor, who is apparently overjoyed. He has missed her terribly. But there is a secondary plot we need to resolve.
Yes, the romance. We can't forget the other couple.
The romance between Qin Guozhen and Daxi Yingying. While Luo Kai was playing detective, his cousin Qin was reconnecting with Yingying. They want to get married.
But there was a massive problem with her background, right? Her family.
A huge problem. Her uncle is Daxi's son. He was a general who surrendered to the rebels. In the eyes of Tang law, that is treason. And in ancient China, treason isn't an individual crime. It stains the whole family. Technically, Yingying should be punished, enslaved, or at least socially exiled.
So how does she get a happy ending? she is the niece of a traitor.
Luokai, the cousin, pulls a brilliant political move. In his report to the emperor about finding Lady May, he slips in a paragraph about Ying.
The classic memo writer. Hey, found your wife. Also, please pardon my cousin's girlfriend.
Basically. But his argument is really interesting. He argues for her virtue. He says, yes, her uncle is a traitor, but she hated his treason. She shaved her head and became a nun rather than follow him. He frames her suffering in the temple as absolute proof of her loyalty to the dynasty.
He separates her individual integrity from her family's crimes. That feels surprisingly modern.
It really is. And the emperor buys it. He is so happy about getting Lady May back that he is in a very forgiving mood. He issues a decree, he pardons Ying and orders her to marry King Guzan.
Now, the text mentions she is married as a viceroom. We should probably unpack that term because, to a modern ear, that sounds less than ideal.
It does sound diminishing today, but we have to look at the context of the 8th century. She was a fugitive, the niece of a traitor facing potential execution. To be granted the title of a secondary wife, an official consort with legal standing to a high-ranking official, that is a massive restoration of status. It is a reward. It signifies that she is back inside the system, protected by the law.
So everyone wins. Lady May is found, Ying is pardoned and married, and the scholars get the credit for orchestrating the whole thing.
And we get a grand finale. The Quiet Mountain Temple, which started as this lonely refuge, is suddenly flooded with imperial guards, golden carriages, and flags. They form a massive procession to take Lady May back to the capital.
But there is one specific detail in this parade that really stood out to me. It is not the gold or the silk. It is what is being carried right in front of Lady May's carriage.
The precious vase.
Yes. Tell us about the vase.
So, remember when the immortal rescued Lady May from the plum tree? She gave her a plum branch. This was months, maybe even a year ago in the timeline. But as they carry this branch back to the capital in a vase, the text says it hasn't withered. It is still fresh.
It is still blooming.
And it is fragrant.
Yeah.
As the caravan moves down the road, the scent of the plum blossoms wafts through the air, and everyone who smells it stops and marvels.
That is such a cinematic image. It is like a practical special effect.
It serves a function, too. It is the physical proof of the supernatural. It is the author telling us, this wasn't a hallucination. The gods were here. It validates Lady May's entire story about the donkey and the immortal.